Mao often proclaimed his predictions that humans could force nature into obedience. In May 1958, he commented, "Make the high mountain bow its head, make the river yield its way." It is an excellent sentence. When we ask the high mountain to bow its head, it has to do so. When we ask the river to yield its way, it must yield. In November, he remarked, "We have always maintained that we must give Taiwan serious attention, tactically, but regard it with contempt in the class struggle." Similarly, in a critique of an essay by Stalin stating that men could not affect astronomy, geology, or other natural processes, Mao argued, "This argument is incorrect. Man's ability to know and change nature is unlimited." His acolytes apparently admired him for this. General Yang Shangkun is said to have boasted, "No other world leader looks down with such disdain on great mountains and powerful rivers." Today, China is one of the world's worst environmental disasters. They are the largest emitter of carbon dioxide. 28,000 rivers have disappeared. And some of the cities have so much smog that people have to wear masks outside. This legacy started under the rule of Chairman Mao Zedong. During the Mao years, there was extreme human interference in the natural world under Mao. The traditional Chinese idea of harmony between heaven and humans was abrogated in favor of Mao's insistence that man must conquer nature. Mao and the Chinese Communist Party's war to bend the physical world to human will had disastrous consequences both for human beings and the natural environment. That was Judith Shapiro, Mao's War Against Nature, Politics, Environment, in Revolutionary China. And this, my friends, is all minus one. Please like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you are subscribed if you watch regularly. Like I said, help me grow. Comment below. Even if you're doing a snarky comment or whatever and you don't like this comment, I might comment back. We'll see. Hey guys, I had links before to Library and BitChute as well as Brighton, and they weren't quite working out. But I am looking into all that, revamping all that, and hopefully I will be having things auto upload to Library and BitChute. And I just got on Rumble. Now, I don't know about Brighton. I need to go back and mess with that. But I will update my links for that, and hopefully YouTube won't muck them up, whatever they do, because I put them in there like every time, and they end up being dead links. But realize that the tech censorship overlords will eventually take over, at least big tech, and they will censor any information, and any information that is contrary to their ultimate goals. So with that said, today we want to talk about these ideas of man controlling nature, because this is a common theme amongst leftists. And one of the things I want to look at specifically is the nature of human beings themselves from the eyes of leftist philosophers or thinkers, people who have been influential, as well as ancient philosophers, specifically Plato and Aristotle, and the ideas that they presented with eugenics. These are the same ideas, by the way, that the fascists in Nazi Germany took over and took hold and made so prevalent that we continue to focus on, in my opinion, just undeservingly. We focus on the Nazis as if they were the only ones, and communism has always had a racial component. Karl Marx himself said, very specifically, that he did not like Jewish capitalism. Interestingly, in Mein Kampf, Hitler's Mein Kampf, he said he did not like Jewish capitalism or Jewish Bolshevism. It's the reason why he thought that fascism was a third way. And that way, my friends, was not capitalism at all. Not like the commies today would like to make it out to be. No, not at all. It was still centralized, state-controlled means of production. It just allowed for some private industry, but in the end, it was always the party that controlled things. In essence, it was no different than communism. And I know commies out there will argue otherwise, but you're wrong. You don't understand your own ideologies, and most of what you believe is a lot of garbage. So, anyways, with that, we have Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And again, like the other day, this is from the World Future Fund. These are just some select quotes. So this is on the social contract. Here it says, the total alienation of each association from society, together with all his rights to the human community. For in the first place, as each gives himself absolutely, the conditions are the same for all. And this being so, no one has interest in mankind than burdensome others. Which I'm not even sure what Rousseau really means here, other than only other people or the total of society can essentially deem what is good for the individual. I utterly reject this. Now you have to understand that Rousseau believed in the noble savage. He believed that it was society within itself that corrupted humankind, and that people out in the wild in the wilderness lived like peaceful little lambs. Of course, this is antithetical to any sort of history. War is inherent within our nature. Even apes war against each other. Moreover, the alienation being without reserve, the union is as perfect as it can be. And no association has anything more to demand. For if the individual retains certain rights, as there would be no common superior to decide between them and the public, each being on one point his own judgment, would ask to be so all or so on all. The state of nature would thus continue, and the association would necessarily become inoperative or tyrannical. Finally, each man, in giving himself to all, gives himself to nobody. And as there is no association over whom he does not acquire the same right as he yields others over himself, he gains the equivalent for everything he loses, an increase of force for the preservation of what he has. If then we discard the social compact, what is not of its essence, we shall find that it reduces itself to the following terms. Each of us puts his person and all of his powers in common under the supreme direction of the general will, and in our corporate capacities, we receive each member as an individual part of the whole. No, I don't think so. This is a refutation of the idea of individualism. The question then you must ask is, what do you do when you are off on your own? What do you do when there is a small compact? What do you do when the will of the rest of the people is against you? Folks, once again, mob rule is the ultimate tyranny. People may disagree. You may leave them alone then. Live and let live. That is the worst that can happen. Under the social contract, no such thing exists. No such thing. And I don't really subscribe to the idea of a social contract. I kind of get it. But I also think that it is lazy thinking for people who are impassioned to disenfranchise the individual. History is replete with individuals who were correct. They were correct about things and they were shunned. So here it says, as soon as the multitudes is so united in one body, it is impossible to offend against one of the numbers without attacking the body, and still more to offend against the body without the members resenting it. By the way, folks, let me remind you as well that often you may take on this perspective, and when you do, it will be turned against you. You see, self-interest is a far, far better way to go about things. Not greediness. We have to understand this. Self-interest. Because if I give my will over, not in my interest, to the rest of society, there's no reason to say that the rest of society is going to benefit. But what will happen, which has always happened throughout all of history, is that tyranny will raise, and there will be a few people who will benefit off the backs of the masses, the slaves, if you would. Duty and interest, therefore, equally oblige the two contracting parties to give each other help. And the same men should seek to combine in their double capacity all the advantages dependent upon that capacity. In order then that the social compact may not be an empty formula, it tactically includes the undertaking, which alone can give force to rest, and whoever refuses to obey the general will shall be compelled to do so by the whole. Again, no. This means nothing less than that he will be forced to be free. What? No. For this is the condition which, by giving each citizen to his country, secure against all personal dependence, in this lies the key to the working of the political machine. This alone legitimizes civil undertaking, which, without it, would be absurd, tyrannical, and liable to the most frightful abuses. And this is the thing when you get like these far leftist type perspectives, these Rousseauian perspectives, these Platonic type perspectives, is you essentially find that you get this form of doublethink, that tyranny is the individual wanting to just do his own thing, but the mob wanting the individual to do a thing, that is freedom. Very much Orwellian. I was watching TIK History the other day. Is a great video, very long, on socialism and why the Nazis, the fascists, the National Socialist Party were socialists. And of course they were. Hitler wrote about it. He adopted Mussolini's concepts very much. If you look at Günter Riemann's Vampire Economy and what Riemann had to say, you'll see that it was more restrictive in his mind than communism, and Riemann was a communist. See, what happens is you have to convince the whole and the masses that things aren't right because of their own responsibility. You essentially have to dictate to them that they're lazy. And therefore they go, well, it's society. Everyone else has to help me out. And folks, I absolutely believe that other people should help other people out. I think it's a personal responsibility. And you're obfuscating that if you do not do that and you give it to another person to do. But within his video, he has a thing about an hour in or so talking about what slavery is. And so if the mob and the masses say that 100% of your labor goes to other people, does that not make you a slave? Or as Abraham Lincoln said, you work and I eat. So are you not a slave if you are taking all your money, all of your product, all of your capital, of your labor, and distributing it to other people? Well, I would say yes. And then the question is, at what point are you no longer a slave? At what percentage point? Is it at 75%, 50%, 80%? See, I will yield to the social contract in that, yeah, maybe I'm cool. You want to take 10%, that we all may gain some benefit from it? Currently in the United States, most people are taxed at about 30 to 40%, depending on how much wealth they have. It may be even higher. It's definitely higher if you include sales tax and things like taxes on gas, property tax, everything else. But basic income tax, payroll taxes, that's about 30%. Our society would be a lot more prosperous and we'd have a lot less poor people if we didn't tax things in such a manner, if we just had a flat tax. And you might argue, you might say, well, Bill, what about all the lazy people? And I'm like, I agree. But at some point, market forces have to take effect. Also, if they want to survive, that's a market force, they will want to work. Also, I believe in charity. I believe in the churches. I believe in mutual aid societies. And I believe in personal responsibility of helping out your neighbor. I just don't think that I should be compelled to do it at the point of a gun. Let's see. Natural liberty versus civil liberty. What man loses by social contract is his natural liberty and an unlimited right to everything he tries to get and succeeds to get. What he gains is civil liberty. This is the idea in the video I made yesterday that only your rights come from the government. And the proprietorship of his possessions. If we are to avoid mistake and weighing one against the other, we must clearly distinguish natural liberty, which is bound only by the strength of the individual, from civil liberty. That's not true. That is not true at all. There is no bounds of natural liberty upon the strength of the individual if other people are willing, being moral agents, willingly, within their own free will, choosing to help. It says, anyways, let me get back here, which is bound by the strength of the individual from civil liberty, which is limited by the general will. But what is the general will? That people will continue to ask for more and more, that their lusts go up, their thirsts go up, that they have economic policies that basically drain the lower classes and prop up the richer classes. See, here's the thing. I'm no Marxist. I'm a free marketeer. I'm a classical liberal. But I understand that the power tends to shift upward. The problem with the Marxists is that everything they wish to implement, or the socialist or the communist, everything they wish to implement literally bolsters that up. Now, that might happen naturally in a free market system, but without someone having a gun directed at you, saying that you must do this or you must do that, there is always choice and there is always freedom to work. People make arguments about this today. Well, my private company, that kind of stuff, right? We don't live in a free market today, folks. We live in a socialistic, fascistic government. They regulate the markets. We have a centralized bank. There are corporate ties within the government. We have government subsidized industries. Very much so the farming industry, which, by the way, is one of the 10 planks of communism that I read to you the other day. Which is merely the effect of force or right of the first occupier from property, which can be funded only on a positive title. Let's read that again. It says, civil liberty, which is limited by the general will, and possession, which is merely the effect of force or right of the first occupier from property, which can be founded only on a positive title. Now, which is merely the effective force. That's exactly what I was saying. People who have the guns, or the sticks, or the knives, or the clubs. They have the fire, pitchforks, whatever. The first occupier. Well, that's never been the case. That what they're saying here is over the first occupier. So if I go and claim land, what Rousseau is saying here, if other people move in, they say, well, no, this is mine. By force. It is mine. That's not right, folks. That's not moral. In fact, biblically speaking, it is covetousness. It is everything antithetical to Christianity. I read a subreddit the other day, briefly, where a guy was like, I suddenly became a Marxist the other day and I'm a Christian. I thought, well, you're not a Christian. You might think you are. I can tell you what, Christ doesn't. Let's see here. From Hegel, we read this a little bit the other day. The nation state is the spirit. So let's go down here to the primacy of the state versus the individual. In civilized nations, true bravery consists in the readiness to give oneself wholly over to the service of the state so that the individual counts, but as one among many. Not personal valor alone is significant. The important aspects lies in self-subordination to the universal cause. What universal cause is that? Well, the rule of the mob. And normally, actually, in society, as wealth is created and certain people rise to the top, you get a plutocracy, people who are the elitists who have all the money, and there becomes an oligarchy, a small group who control things, and they're the ones that get all the rights and the privileges and basically never get in trouble. Hillary Clinton comes to mind. You know, you remember, lock her up, right? Got away with it. People are calling for Trump now. I'm not exactly sure why. I've still yet to hear directly what laws he has broken. They just say, well, we don't know about all the court cases. So what? Everybody, there's court cases. Guys, it happens. You might say his taxes. Well, you were uninformed and misinformed because Trump paid millions in taxes. He was paid ahead. That's why he only paid $700 the other year or whatever it was. He was paid up. He was paid forward, paid in advance. A state is well constituted with internally powerful when the private interest of the citizen is one with the common interest of the state. Then one finds its gratification and realization in the other. No, it's the other way around. Hegel is absolutely wrong. It is when the interest of the state is that of the citizen, meaning the citizen comes first. See, we have a problem. This problem has to do with Dunbar's number. We can only have about 150 true associations. So after that, no one cares about you. You're just another. You're just a tribe, and it's very easy to demonize you. So when this blows up into hundreds, more than 150, but hundreds of people, thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of people, it doesn't work. Not unless you want to be an automaton. Not unless you want to be a slave and a robot. The origin of the state involves imperious lordship on the one hand, instinctive submission on the other. Obedience, lordly power, and the fear inspired by a ruler in itself implies some degree of voluntary connection. It is not isolated will of individuals that prevails. Individual pretensions are relinquished, and the general will is the essential bond of political union. No, you can agree upon things, and those who don't want to agree get to go their own way. That brings me to Aristotle. This is on politics. It's not that bad of a read, guys, if you want to read ancient philosophy, ancient literature on politics is about the organization of the state. Now, Aristotle refuted Plato and his organization of the state. However, he still had some ideas that you might find a little offensive, a little problematic today. And I'm using words of the left in jest because that is all of their ideologies come from this. This is the root of what they think. They do literally think that you aren't smart enough or intelligent enough to make decisions for yourself. I guarantee you, when you talk to any and every leftist, they will tell you that people cannot take care of themselves, that there are people that are just, they're bad luck or whatever. Most of them are brainwashed and thinking, what's the capitalist system? It's holding them down. Well, we don't even live in true capitalism. The idea that we live in this mixed economy is actually a hindrance to our wealth. Though the parts of our market that are free are why we have so much wealth and luxury, as well as technology. But you must understand this. You must understand that these ideas are old and ancient. They go way back. They're nothing new. As Ecclesiastes says, there is nothing new under the sun. So here it says, these considerations therefore make clear that the nature of the slave and his essential quality, one whom is a human being, belonging by nature not to himself but to another, is by nature a slave. And a person is a human being belonging to another if being a man, he is an article of property. And an article of property is an instrument of action separable from its owner. Well, let's go back to Hegel real quick. It says the origin of state involves the imperious lordship, instinctive submission, obedience, fear inspired by the ruler, implies a voluntary connection, isolated will of the individual prevails, individual pretensions are relinquished, and the general will is the essential bond. So, it's slavery on both accounts. And this reminds me also of Nietzsche's master-slave morality. Now, I think Nietzsche's thoughts were deeper than just these. Nietzsche was thinking about how people actually conduct their everyday lives, not necessarily just political connection. But these folks are talking about political connection. And these were the same justifications that justified slavery, and all of the woke scolds out there who were telling people that they're evil people because their ancestors, who they never met, had nothing to do with, whatever else, had slaves, just want to re-enslave you under communism. They go, no, we're setting you free. Well, again, a good argument from the video I just mentioned, TIK History, go check him out, is that basically the Marxist, even though they said there would be an anarchist society eventually, will never allow that to happen. It can never happen because they're going to raise up a tyranny. And we see that every single time. Then you might say, but Bill, that's not the point. That's not what he said. Okay, but if there is an anarchist society, then why would it be communistic? It will immediately become capitalistic once again, because people will want to trade, and there will be no one pointing a gun at anybody, unless it's only by force. Either way, might makes right, folks. And that is always the thing. That's why postmodernism came in, because the economics of Marxism does not work. It doesn't work. That we've seen it time and time again. The Keynesian Marxist economics do not work, and it's the reason why you are impoverished, and it has nothing to do, or the reason why you're not wealthier than you could be. And either that or you're lazy and you're just not hardworking. Don't get me wrong. There's that individual responsibility side. But as far as the system goes, that's actually the reality. And it's also a system that creates a lot of corruption, which you can read about in The Vampire Economy, which is The Vampire Economy, subtitle, Doing Business in Nazi Germany by Gunter Riedmann. If I'm not mistaken, you can find that book for free online in PDF form, I believe under the Mises.org website. But let's continue. It says, but we must next consider whether or not anyone exists who is by nature of this character, and whether it is advantageous and just for anyone to be a slave, or whether, on the contrary, all slavery is against nature. And it is not difficult either to discern the answer by the theory or to learn it empirically. Now he's saying, now is slavery moral? Here it is. Authority and subordination are conditions, not only inevitable, but also expedient. In some cases, things are marked out for the moment of birth to rule or be ruled. And he goes on about stuff like this, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to other quotes. This is Plato from On Politics. It says, unless, said I, either philosophers become kings in our state, or those whom we now call our kings and rulers take to the pursuit of philosophy seriously and adequately, and there is a conjunction of these two things, political power and philosophical intelligence, while the motley horde of the natures who at present pursue, either apart from their own compulsory, or what does that say? Compulsory, I had it right the first time. Excuse the dyslexia, guys. I know I say it all the time. Excluded. There can be no concession of troubles for our state, nor, I fancy, for the human race either. Nor until this happens will the Constitution, which we have been expounding in theory, ever be put into practice within the limits of possibility and see the light of the sun. Now, what he's talking about here in summation is an elite class, the technocracy, the smart people. They get to rule. And if not, nothing will be perfect. I suppose the makers of the law are the weaker sort of men and the more numerous. So it is with a view to themselves that their own interest, and they make their laws and distribute their praises and censures. And to terrorize the stronger sort of folk who are able to get an advantage and to prevent them from getting one over them. They tell them that such aggrandizement is fool and unjust, and that wrongdoing is just this endeavor to get the advantage of one's neighbors. For I expect that they are well content to see themselves on an equality, when they are so inferior. So this is why, by convention, it is termed unjust and foul to aim at an advantage over the majority, and why they call it wrongdoing. But the nature, in my opinion, herself proclaims the fact that it is right for the better to have advantage over, or sorry, of the worse, and the abler of the feebler. It is obvious in many cases that this is so, not only in the animal world, but in the states and races that would be ethnos, nations. But in those days, a nation or ethnicity, where we get that word from Greek, is a race, essentially. What we call race now is a very convoluted, nonsensical type of thing. And I know people on the right might be like, Bill, what are you talking about? No, it is. It's oversimplified. Culture and ethnicity is a far better metric and standard. Collectively, of men, that right has been decided to consist in the sway and advantage of the stronger over the weaker. For by what manner of right did Xerxes march against Greece, or his fathers, Scytha, or take the countless other cases of the sort that one might mention? Why, surely these men follow nature. The nature of right is acting thus, yes, on my soul, and follow the law of nature, though not that, I dare say, which is made by us. We mold the best and strongest among us, take them from their infancy like young lions, and utterly enthrall them by spells and witchcraft, telling them the while that they must have but their equal share, that this is what is fair and just. But I fancy then some man arise with a nature of sufficient force. He shakes off all that we have taught him, bursts his bonds, breaks free. He tramples underfoot our codes and jugularies, our charms and laws, which are all against nature. Our slave rise and revolt and show himself our master, and there dawns the full light of natural justice. So this may sound like he's talking about the underclass coming up, but he's really not. What he's talking about is an oligarchy of the elites, and you have to read the full Republic. But essentially, there's the lower class, the people that Plato says are led by the belly, the people that are just their appetites, they're just their stomach makes them just not think, and they rule by their passions. And then there's the people that rule by their heart. Yeah, their courage and their strength. And those are the military class that keep those other people in line. And by the way, those are the merchants and merchants and artisans and farmers and that type. They're essentially the slave class. And then you have the people that rule with the mind. The philosopher king. We must take the children away from all these people, and we must protect them and put them in the guardian class so that they can eventually become the elite class of folk. And it's kind of quite sad. But that brings us back to things of the later centuries. So you may have heard of this guy, Charles Darwin, that wrote this book that was a plagiarized copy, more or less, of his grandfather Erasmus's works. And this is the theory of evolution guy, right? We all know who Darwin is, right? And this is supposed science today. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things within Darwinism that might be correct or not. In fact, science has a thing called neo-Darwinism. But the idea really goes way back in ancient times. In fact, the idea of panspermia, which many scientists now believe, including Richard Dawkins, goes way back to the ancient Greeks. Very, 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 very far back. We're talking about something like 2,600 years or so. But Darwin himself basically saw some things and he goes, this is this theory. And with that, it took off, and many of the atrocities later on in the 20th century could be directly attributed to Darwinism and eugenics, which is an idea that came out of Darwinism. So it says here, with savages, the weak in body or mind are soon eliminated, and those that survive commonly exhibit it. a vigorous state of health. We civilized men, on the other hand, do our utmost to check the process of elimination. We build asylums for the imbecile, the maimed, and the sick. We institute poor laws, and our medical men exert their utmost skill to save the life of everyone to the last moment. There's a reason to believe that vaccination has preserved thousands from a weak constitution. Would formerly have succumbed to smallpox. 1/3 of all people died from smallpox, folks. 1/3. Thus, the weak members of civilized society propagate their kind. No one who has attended to the breeding of domestic animals will doubt that this must be highly injurious to the race of man. Sounds a little Hitlerian to me. It is surprising how soon a want of care, or care wrongly directed, leads to the degeneration of domestic race. But excepting in the case of man itself, hardly anyone is so ignorant as to allow worse animals to breed. Aid which we feel impelled to give to the helpless is mainly an incidental result of the instincts of sympathy. Or it could be, a compulsion as a duty to God. It could be that. Because if you want to get completely primitive, why would you even care? Why would you even care? Might makes right, folks. Why care? Which was originally acquired as part of the instincts, but subsequently rendered, in a manner previously indicated, more tender and more widely diffused. Nor could we check our sympathy, even at the urging of hard reason, without deterioration in the noblest part of our nature. The surgeon may harden himself whilst performing an operation, for he knows that he is acting for the good of his patient. But if we were intentionally to neglect the weak and hopeless, it could only be for the contingent benefit. The contingent benefit. That is, he's saying, let the weak die off. I promise you, this happens more often than not under socialist communism, Marxism, all the left-isms, right? With an overwhelming present evil, we must therefore bear the undoubted bad effects of the weak surviving and propagating their kind. But there appears to be at least one check and steady action, namely that the weaker and inferior members of society do not marry so freely as the sound, and this check might be indefinitely increased by the weak in body and mind refraining from marriage. And this, my folks, my friends, is pretty gross to me. Believe it or not, I've worked with a lot of mentally handicapped people, a lot of physically handicapped people, because I worked in a jail. And you get those people, and they're allowed to marry, and that's fine. It's probably a good thing that they're allowed to marry, because their wives keep them out of trouble. When you're dealing with a 22, 23-year-old man or whatever who has the mindset of a 10-year-old, they tend to get in trouble. And then when they know, they are smart enough often to know that they won't be in real trouble because they have a mental handicap, they use that to manipulate. But let those people do what they want. If we need to provide services to take care of them, let's do it. Let's do it out of the heart. Let's do it out of compassion. Let's do it without the state, in fact. And there are many people, and I've met them, who feel they have callings to work with such people. Just like some people feel like when I was in the jail, we had a really great nurse who felt like she had a calling to work with inmates who are not necessarily the most polite or respectful people. So here we have Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood. And, of course, the subheading here is the danger of uncontrolled breeding. We should not minimize the great outstanding service of eugenics for critical and diagnostic investigations. It demonstrates that our uncontrolled fertility is universally correlated with disease, poverty, overcrowding, and transmission of heritable traits. And back in 1922, when this was written, Um, she was talking about abortion, not modern birth control. What's interesting about this as well is that the current leftists, they just want to eliminate people in the world. They think that there's too many people that populate the world currently. Because they're compassionate. They're compassionate folks. They want you to die because they're compassionate. They don't want your family to suffer. It's a very twisted mindset. We are praying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unincreasing, sprawling class of human beings who should never have been born at all. That the wealth of individual and the state is being diverted from the development and progress of human expression and civilization. Excuse me. So Sanger said quite specifically, she talked about this with the black community. And the number one killer in the black community is abortion. There have been more children aborted in the black community since abortion has been legal than there ever were during slavery, or there ever has been since, the gang-on-gang violence or any of that kind of stuff. It's appalling. Now, maybe you don't care. Maybe you agree with abortion. I'm not here to argue about morals with you. I'm here to point out what these people believe. Morally speaking, though, I will say this. If you think that the elimination, extermination of people, the control of the population, whatever else, is moral and just, you're a totalitarian. Hitler was a totalitarian, folks. Mussolini himself created that term, meaning in totality, in complete control of the state. That's really what you think. And I love all of you woke school people, because you're like, I'm not like Hitler, but I have all the same ideas he has. I think I nuance them different. Well, upon first principles, I reject your argument and say that, no, you believe in the exact same kind of things. You just believe it for different people. Currently, of course, the white man is being scapegoat, just like the Jew was in Nazi Germany. Every single case of inherited defect, every malformed child, every congenital trait human beings brought into the world is an infinite importance to that poor individual. But it is of scarcely less importance to the rest of us and all of our children, who must pay in one way or another for these biological and racial mistakes. One more. Degeneration has already begun. Eugenicists just demonstrate that 2/3 of our manhood of military age are physically too unfit to shoulder a rifle, and that the feeble-minded and syphilitic, people who have syphilis, the irresponsible and an defective breed unhindered. That the vicious cycle of mental and physical defect, delinquency, and beggary is encouraged by the unseen, unthinking sentimentality of our age to populate asylum, hospital, and prison. All these things the eugenicists see and points out with a courage entirely admirable. The need for sterilization. I am not going to keep reading. Singer was a gross individual. And again, she thought she was better than you. This wasn't about her. And she was allowed to live, of course, but others weren't. And I can tell you, many people who are suffering some sort of handicap, I know that's not woke speak. They're handy-capable, right? No, folks, people that have disabilities are capabilities. I'm sorry. People who have these things, though, they're perfectly proud to live in life and make their own way. That's called dignity. They have dignity despite what's holding them back. On occasion I bring up, I'm a short fellow, a manlet, if you would. I don't really care. It's like, it's funny because people would come to me and be like, oh, you're short or whatever. And it's like, oh, thanks. I really, I didn't know that. Never realized that people were taller. Like, this is the human condition, though. Folks are rude, and they say random things when they don't know you and whatever else, and they have certain misconceptions or preconceptions. They assume many things. They assume that a big man, a tall man, is going to be a better leader. Like, that's been scientifically based. In the Bible, Samuel, in 1 Samuel, gave the Israelites King Saul solely because he stood taller than the rest of the population. And they all thought, man, oh man, Saul's going to be a great leader because look how tall he is. He's such a tall guy. We are all different, folks. That is part of our uniqueness and our individuality, and that's what makes us great. Disability, not disability, whatever it is. We all have different skills. Some of us are clearer thinkers. Some of us are better at math. Some of us are great with handiwork. I knew a guy, loved to death, I used to work with, hated computers, technology, whatever else, because it just seemed too complicated for him. You need him to do anything handy, build a car, do some plumbing, carpentry, whatever else. He was awesome. Great guy, nice guy. And, not everyone is the same. Not everyone has the same skills. Unfortunately, the left seem to think so. That's where division of labor comes from, folks. Individual differences. George Bernard Shaw, the famous playwright, extermination of the socially incompatible. The notion that the person should be safe from extermination as long as they do not commit willful murder or levy war against the crown or kidnap or throw vitriol is not only to limit social responsibility unnecessarily and a privilege the large range of intolerable misconduct that lies outside them, but to divert attention from the essential justification for extermination, which is always incorrigible, social incompatibility, and nothing else. And here it talks about the use of gas chambers and whatever else. If I'm not mistaken, Shaw had some pleasant words for Hitler. Here, just real quick from the wiki, this is his Fabian years when he was younger. Talks about some things, blah, 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 blah. You can read over this and his belief in Fabian socialism. That was the socialism in England at the time. It's the same socialist society that Orwell came out of. Very popular. But, we keep going down. It says here, Shaw's enthusiasm for Soviet Union dated to the early 1920s when he had hailed Lenin as one of the really interesting statesmen in Europe. Having turned down several chances to visit in 1931, he joined the party led by Nancy Astor. The carefully managed trip culminated in a large or lengthy meeting with Stalin, whom Shaw later described as a Georgian. That's a form of planned economy, socialism, basically. Georgian gentleman with no malice in him. None at all. Stalin was not a murderous prick at all. And I say that knowing things, having read Stalin, what he wrote. Shaw's admiration for Mussolini and Stalin demonstrated his growing belief that dictatorship was the only viable political arrangement. When the Nazi Party came to power in Germany in January 1933, Shaw described Hitler as a very remarkable man, a very able man, and professed himself proud to be the only writer in England who was scrupulously polite and just to Hitler. Actually, Orwell was pretty much himself. And, over here in the United States, FDR had some kind words for Hitler. His principal admiration for Stalin, whose regime had championed uncritically throughout the decades, Shaw saw in 1939 Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in a triumph for Stalin, who he said now had Hitler under his thumb. Okay, and this goes on. I'm just not going to keep reading, but just some thoughts about Shaw there. Bertrand Russell, birth control and race. It must be admitted, however, that there are certain dangers before long. The population may actually diminish. And this is already happening in the most intelligent sections of the most intelligent nations. Government opposition to birth control propaganda gives a biological advantage to stupidity, since it is chiefly stupid people who governments succeed in keeping in ignorance. Well, that might be true. they might keep stupid people in ignorance. I actually think that folks that are not of the highest intelligence seem to understand things a little bit better because they don't make it overly complicated. And folks that are very smart overcomplicate things, and they get lost in the nuance, folks. Lost in the sauce, as we used to say in the military. Before long, birth control may become nearly universal among the white races. It will then not deteriorate their quality, but only diminish their numbers, at a time when uncivilized races are still prolific and preserved from a high death rate by white science. This situation will lead to a tendency already shown by the French to employ more prolific races as mercenaries. Governments will oppose the teachings of birth control among Africans for fear of losing recruits, meaning they can get Africans to fight our wars for us. The result will be an immense numerical inferiority of the white races, leading probably to the extermination of a mutiny of mercenaries. And that was in 1924. It goes on about eugenics, just to keep moving. You guys can look these up yourself. Again, this is on the worldfuturefund.org. But yeah, these sound like Nazi ideas, except for what was Bertrand Russell: communism, anarchism, and socialism. Russell, prior being a socialist Georgiist, so Georgian also called modern times, Jewism is known historically as the single tax movement and the economic ideology holding wild, blah, 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 blah. Go read it for yourself. It's a form of socialism. In 1914, he wrote some stuff. It is clear that socialism are the hopes of the world. And support for guild socialism. Admire of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who implemented socialism in the United States. Fascism, truly, really. Folks, these things are the same. These people have always taught the same. When the left's like, oh no, the parties, they switched. No, they didn't. Your ideologies are the same. The people in America who are on the right are liberty-minded people. In Europe, it's different because it's always been this socialistic, I shouldn't say always, but since the fall of monarchies, has largely been more government, more tyranny, more socialism. So their right wing is just socialism light. We kind of have that here with the Republican Party, with the neocons and the rhinos. But most people who consider themselves conservatives, actually, they like constitutionalism. Now, some of them do like some socialist ideas, and there are people that are on the alt-right, as it's called, that alt-right. They aren't right-wing. They're left-wingers. Look at Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer voted for Joe Biden. He likes if you look into what he has to say, he likes the idea that the rights come from governments. He believes in socialism. Hitler believed in socialism too, just for the Nazis. He just wanted to make his race the superior race of the land because he believed they were descendants of the Aryans, who were the lost race of the Atlanteans. That gets into H.P. Blavatsky and the mystics and the occult and all those kind of things, which I will be covering here soon, or I will try to at least. Anyways, let's go on. It says Russell expressed great hope in communist experiment and so forth. However, when he visited the Soviet Union, he met Lenin, and he was unimpressed with the system in place. It wasn't far enough, apparently. Blah, 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 blah. It says he believed Lenin to be similar to a religious zealot, cold, and possessing no love of liberty. Well, yeah, you can't have liberty when the foundation of your philosophy is to make the state a tyranny, to crush all of your enemies. It's not all of a sudden going to give up its power. Show me where that's happened in history. There may have been a good king at one point or two. I cannot think of any off the top of my head, but that does happen. George Washington, for instance. George Washington gave up his power. That was it. It says here he criticized Stalin, so he was a little bit better than George Bernard Shaw, but not much, folks, not much. And finally, we have Thomas Malthus. This is a little bit earlier, 1798. But Malthusians believed the earth was going to be overpopulated and a bunch of people were going to die. Again, I'll reference the show. Go watch the UK version Go look it up, Google it, DuckDuckGo, whatever. You can find it online for free over on YouTube. There are people that have it posted up of utopia. It's Malthusian ideology. It's left-wing ideology that you have to break a couple eggs. You have to do whatever you can to save all humanity. The ends justify the means, as the saying goes from Machiavelli. So it says the power of population is indefinitely greater than the power of the earth to produce substances for man. We don't know that. Technology advances. We have hydroponics now. We have advanced science for things that they didn't in the past. Not to mention greenhouses. We have more wealth, so people can produce on. We have more wealth, so we can get more technology, so people can produce on smaller plots of gardens and whatever. Have you met anyone with a garden that just has an abundance and has to give things away? Yeah, it's calling me self-sufficient. See, this problem that we're facing, as far as the left is concerned, about global climate catastrophe and overpopulation, all that stuff, isn't a matter of self-sufficiency and individualism. It's actually the opposite. It's a matter of collectivism. Collectivism, as I read to you back in the beginning from Mao, destroys the nature of Earth and it pollutes. China is the number one emitter at the moment. It isn't individuals, folks. It is the society and the tyrants and those that control, and you being brainwashed and on the dole, worshiping the state and those that have knowledge, the Gnostics, secret knowledge. Well, they know better. I have knowledge, but I'm sharing it to you freely right here. I'm telling you where to get it at. I'm telling you to explore deeper. Look into it yourself. Start thinking like a philosopher. And if you ain't bright enough, then hey, just look at it simply. What are these people saying? Face value. What are they saying? And most people on the right understand that. Population, when unchecked, increases in a geometrical ratio. Subsistence increases only in an arithmetic ratio. Slightly acquiescence with numbers a slight acquaintance with numbers will show the immensity of our first power in comparison with the second. By the law of our nature, which makes food necessary to the life of man, the effects of these two unequal powers must be kept equal. This implies a strong and constantly operating check on population from a difficulty of substances and so forth. Anyways, he's just saying it's mathematically impossible. We can look at it. We can look at the famines he thinks it's going to cause, the millions of people that are going to suffer. These are the same people that would essentially allow people to suffer. Before I go, I want to play from you this. Now, this is from Hans Rosling, and he's going to explain something to you. He's going to explain how the global population will cap. This is the science. This is the current estimated science by economists. Hans Rosling unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but his message was quite important, so I'm going to play it. Well, let's give that a second to load or reload, whatever it must do.
Remember the day in school when our teacher told us that the world population had become 3 billion people. And that was in 1960. And I'm going to talk now of how world population has changed from that year and into the future.
Well, this
but
is just
I will
lovely.
not use digital technology as I've done during my first 5 TED Talks. Instead, I have progressed, and I am today launching a brand new analog teaching technology that I picked up from IKEA. This box contains 1 billion people. And our teacher told us that the industrialized world, 1960, had 1 billion people. And the developing world, she said, they had 2 billion people. And they lived away then. There was a big gap between the 1 billion in the industrialized world and the 2 billion in the developing world. The industrialized world People were healthy, educated, rich, and they had small families. And their aspiration was to buy a car. And in 1960, all Swedes were saving to try to buy a Volvo like this. This was the economic level at which Sweden was. But in contrast to this, the developing world, far away, the aspiration of the average family there was to have food for the day. And they were saving to be able to buy a pair of shoes. There was an enormous gap in the world when I grew up. And this gap between the West and the rest has created a mindset of the world which we still use linguistically when we talk about the West and the developing world. But the world has changed, and it's overdue to upgrade that mindset and that taxonomy of the world and to understand it. And that's what I'm going to show you. Because since 1960, what has happened in the world up to 2010 is that a staggering 4 billion people have been added to the world population. Just look how many. The world population has doubled since I went to school. And of course, there has been economic growth in the West. A lot of companies have happened to grow the economy, so the Western population moved over to here. And now their aspiration is not only to have a car, now they want to have a holiday on a very remote destination, and they want to fly. So this is where they are today. And the most successful of the developing countries here, they have moved on, you know, and they have become emerging economies, we call them. And they...
By the way, folks, that when you're talking about flight there, just a quick point popped in my head. I'm sure you know a lot of people that are lower middle class that take vacations, that fly to the Bahamas, to Bermuda, to wherever. That was not easy to do 30 years ago for most people, for most families. It's much easier today. Are there problems with our economy? Absolutely. Has more to do with the Federal Reserve Bank, fiat currency, the transfer of wealth that's going on right now, the Great Reset, and everything else. The coof, you know, that is meant to scare everybody to death. And I can't believe how sheeple-like people are, but I guess that is the nature of humankind, which is why dictators and tyrants have ruled the world from the very beginning. In any case, let's continue.
They are now buying cars. And what happened a month ago was that the Chinese company Geely, they acquired the Volvo company. And then finally the Swedes understood that something big had happened in the world. You know? So there they are. And the tragedy is that the 2 billion over here that is struggling for food and shoes, they are still almost as poor as they were 50 years ago. The new thing is that we have the biggest pile of billions, the 3 billions here, which are also becoming emerging economies. Because they are quite healthy, relatively well educated, and they already also have 2 to 3 children per woman, as those have. And their aspiration now is, of course, to buy a bicycle. And then later on, they would like to have a motorbike also. But this is the world we have today. No longer any gap. But the distance from the poorest here, the very poorest, to the very richest over here, is wider than ever. But there is a continuous world from walking, biking, driving, flying. There are people on all levels, and most people tend to be somewhere in the middle. This is the new world we have today in 2010. And what will happen in the future? Well, I'm going to project into 2050. I was in Shanghai recently, and I listened to what's happening in China, and it's pretty sure that they will catch up, just as Japan did. All the projection. This one will grow with 1 to 2 or 3%, and this grows with 7, 8, and then they will land up here. They will start flying. And these lower middle income countries, the emerging economies, they will also forge forwards economically. And if, but only if, we invest in the right green technology so that we can avoid severe climate change and energy can still be relatively cheap, then they will move all the way up here. And they will start to buy electric cars. Isn't it? This is what we will find there. So what about the poorest 2 billion? What about the poorest 2 billion here? Will they move on? Well, here population comes in, because there we already have 2 to 3 children per woman. Family planning is widely used, and population growth is coming to an end. Here population is growing. So these 2 billions will in the next decades increase to 3 billions, and then will thereafter increase to 4 billions. There is nothing but the nuclear war of a kind we've never seen that can stop this from happening, because we already have this in process. But if, and only if, they get out of poverty, they get education, they get improved child survival, they can buy a bicycle and a cell phone and come here, then population growth will stop up there in 2050. We cannot have people on this level looking for food and shoes, because then we get continued population growth. And let me show you why, by converting back to the old-time digital technology. Here I have on the screen my country bubbles. Every bubble is a country, the size is population, the colors show the continent. The yellow one there is the Americas, dark blue is Africa, brown is Europe, green is Middle East, and this light blue is South Asia, that's India, and this is China. Size is population. Here I have children per woman. 2 children, 4 children, 6 children, 8 children. Big families, small families. The year is 1960, and down here child survival. The percentage of children surviving childhood up to starting school. 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, and almost 100%, as we have today in the wealthiest and healthiest countries. Look, this is the world my teacher talked about in 1960. 1 billion Western world here, high child survival, small families, and all the rest, the rainbow of the developing countries, with very large families and poor child survival. What has happened? I start the world. Here we go. Can you see, as the year passed by, child survival is increasing. They get soap, hygiene, education, vaccination, penicillin, and then family planning. Family size is decreasing. They get up to 90% of child survival, then family.
So to make this a little briefer, what happens is, and you can look at his work, he has newer videos. I had just happened to pull this one up. Here's one from 4 years ago. But what happens is he shows that as people get wealthier, and they get wealthier through capitalism, folks, it is not through socialism that will just make them poorer. In fact, the reason why they are getting richer, especially over in India, is because of capitalism. And what he shows is that people stop having as many children. It's one of the reasons why here in the West we stop having as many children. We get more materialistic. Now, I don't think that that's completely a good thing, because then we have fools in the government who are going, oh, we're not replacing population fast enough for these jobs and this and that. Well, you're also outsourcing jobs elsewhere, and you're also putting more and more people on welfare. So there are other factors that are in play there. But I did want you to see that it was, over time, a cap in population that was going to happen. Now, again, he has better videos. I should have picked a better one, perhaps. But lastly, before I get out of here, I do want to show you this. These are all the gulags in the Soviet Union. These are various Soviet states. Of course, this is Russia, Mother Russia herself. And I want you to realize that if you don't think that these ideas from these people are still out there and on the left, as they always are, that is centralized authority, we can control the universe, man can be God, this is what they want to do with you. And they have openly talked about it. They've openly talked about this, folks, all over the place. They are all over Reddit. They are all over dark corners of the internet, all over Twitter. They are on recordings with undercover journalists from Project Veritas saying this. This is their goals. They have evil intentions. You do not make the world a better place by murdering a bunch of people you don't like. We have to help each other up. And it's not through the government either. It starts with you on the other side of this video watching. It starts with me helping my neighbor. When you have a little bit of extra, give it away. Join a church. Maybe you're not religious. Do it for the social function. Maybe you'll actually come to know God. Do something outside of yourself and quit asking. Do something, yes, outside of the government, I meant, and quit asking for the government to do everything for you. This is just not tenable. You are literally asking for the world to do everything for you so that you may essentially sit back and go, yep, I'm a good person because I voted for the right person. That's not being a good person. You're voting for your own slavery, your children's, and your grandchildren's. So, folks, with all that, hey, live show, the ends justify the memes. We didn't go live this Wednesday. We are going live with our friend Kiza GT on Saturday. This is today, what is it? Thursday, the 10th of December, 2020. But so if you're watching this, sometime later, it doesn't matter, of course. But every Wednesday, generally at 7 p.m., we are going live. I'm also going to be over on Yiz the Eunuch's Corner Club tomorrow. If anyone sees this tonight or before that happens, she goes live at 2 p.m., I believe. You can check us out over on DLive, the ends _justify _memes. I do have a subscribe star, all -1. You can find me there if you want to donate. No big tiers or anything, but just, if you want to help out, do whatever. It's just an easy way. It's $5 a month. If not, whatever. I'm compelled to do this stuff, and I'm going to keep doing it. But, folks, with all that, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for staying around. Please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. This has been all -1, and I wish you all well.